Just about anybody can press buttons, but the real challenge of League is pressing them at the right time. But in this video, I'm going to try and show you ways that you can do it even better than before by taking advantage of things that you might not even know are already there. Another thing you should take advantage of is our website, where we have tons of guides that are just like this one, but get to go even more in depth. But right now it's time to focus on the keys and key binds that you need to be using in all the games that you're playing. So if you happen to learn about something new, make sure you hit the like button to let me know that you learned something in this video. And while you're at it, subscribe to keep up with the rest of the guides and stuff we release. Now it's time to jump right in with the first thing that I'm going to be talking about, which is pinging in a different way than you might be used to, but trust me, it is a lot better. At this point, I'm really surprised Riot even teaches the normal way of hitting G or V in order to ping in their tutorial, because what you should be doing instead is holding down your Alt key in order to ping, because when you hold down your Alt key and you left click, you'll actually be just hotkeying and automatically pinging every single time that you click, and this is way easier and faster than using G or V. Instead of having to click the button every single time that you're trying to ping, you can simply hold it down. Now you might be thinking, Ace, what about the back ping? That's what V is for, right? It's different from G and it's something completely different in terms of communication. And that's true, which is why the other thing that you need to be taking advantage of is left control for back pinging if you really want to use it. Both left alt and left control are really easy to hit without really moving your hand. Your thumb is pretty much always on spacebar no matter what you're doing, and if it's not, let me know what your keyboard layout is, because that's just kind of weird. All you have to do is move your thumb over a little bit and you can easily hold down left alt. And let's face it, if you're pinging somewhere, you don't need to recenter the camera on yourself, and even if you do, I mean, you gotta move your thumb like a couple centimeters to the right. You could do that plenty fast while you're spam pinging your teammates by holding down left alt. And if you're trying to get people to run away and you want to use the back ping, then you could simply just push down the edge of your hand onto your control key, which is really easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of movement either, and it's really hard to mess up, honestly, unless your hands are like the size of Antarctica for some reason. Not only are hitting these keys easier and faster, but of course they also have mechanical advantages like I mentioned, where you just have to hold down the button instead of repeatedly pressing it, which allows you to be more accurate. But by far, the biggest benefit is the fact that you don't have to move your hand out of the position that it's already in. If you're trying to hit G or V in order to ping and warn your teammates or communicate something, you're taking your hand off of the important keys. You might be moving your first finger over to G, or maybe even trying to move your thumb up to hit V, and that could be really annoying because you might accidentally hit other keys or not be able to use an ability like your ulti where it counts. There's still one last step to this, and it's the fact that you can always substitute the back ping for the danger ping in the smart ping menu. And just in case you don't know about smart pinging, if you click to go for a ping and then hold it down briefly and flick your mouse in one of the 4 cardinal directions, you can get a more direct ping, where up is danger, right is on my way, down is assist me, and left is enemy missing. Instead of worrying about an additional keybind and hitting the control, you can simply use the danger ping to warn people. Hold down Alt, click to ping, and swipe up and release, and there you go. You have something that's basically the same, and assuming that you aren't on 3 million DPI, you're not going to be too inaccurate with your movement either. And now you've learned how to consolidate all your pings onto one button no matter what situation you're in, and a button that's easier to press. Let's take a step away from the pinging now and talk about something else that does have to do with vision to a certain degree, and I'm going to talk about F keys here. In case you don't know, these are bound by default. A lot of people don't tend to use them though, and it's very clear that they don't, because they give you something incredibly important in League of Legends. They give you free information. Honestly, I can only scratch the surface of the difference between you not using F keys and you using F keys. It's just so massive, because when you properly use them, you can get amazing information and insights onto how your allies are doing in lane and in the jungle, where they're trying to move around, what their plan is in an upcoming fight that they're about to take, and much more. No matter what role you're playing, you want to hit the corresponding F keys to check up on your allies and see what they're doing, where they're moving around in lane, what their enemy health is, what the minion wave is looking like, what abilities they're using right now, and all of this can factor into things like roams, ganking with global abilities, understanding just how strong an individual champion is with their CS lead and their current items, and so much more. Seriously guys, do not underestimate just how powerful using these can be. It literally affects everything from using a global skill shot like an Ash R all the way down to what you decide to do right now with the minion wave that's in front of you and how you trade with your opponent. Using the F keys also has another purpose. If you happen to see an enemy on the minimap and one of your allies spots them out nearby, you can simply use the F keys to move your camera to your ally and then pan towards your enemy. And it's important to look towards your enemies for a few reasons. One, you could see the direction that they're facing. And you know, the way that they're facing is going to be the way that they're moving 9 times out of 10. So you could use this to inform you on where the enemy is trying to go. Maybe you spot them out right as they're clearing a ward, and you could do that trick to get to them sooner and see where they move on the minimap and then also on your screen. This can keep you safe from ganks and roams from the enemy, and everything that I mentioned before also applies to you as well, where enemies might be looking to use global abilities on you, and if you notice that somebody like a Pantheon suddenly walks backwards out of lane or into the river and they're moving towards you, you might want to watch out for somebody man-dropping on top of you. Getting used to using F keys will give you better map awareness and better situational awareness that can help you make decisions and react to the enemy as well as make your own plays. It's a vital thing to use. Just like our website, where I really recommend you go check out the other guides we have on vision and map awareness, as it's something that's truly important and hard to nail down in just one video on important keys and keybinds that I happen to be talking about F keys on. But now that we've covered those, let me move on to another one, and this one isn't bound by default. So if you're going to use this, put some thought into where you put it on your keyboard, because you're probably gonna have to rearrange some things. And I mean, if you're extra gamer, you can bind it onto a button that you happen to have on your mouse. But me, I don't like doing that. I'll be letting you guys know where I have this key bound just so that you could try it out and see if it works for you. I'm of course talking about the area is warded ping, which is something that's important on its own, but the fact that you probably didn't even know it existed is really bad, and you better be taking advantage of it in your games. For me personally, I bound it to the tilde key. You might also call it the grave key or the backtick key. There's a lot of names for it, but it's the one that's below your escape and to the left of 1. And just to give you all this sort of regional landmarks in case you still can't locate it, it's above your tab key. And if you aren't pressing your tab key, well, I'll be covering that one later, so make sure you stick around for that. The area is warded ping is big for a couple reasons. One, not too many people use it, so it can be a great way to alert your allies because it's a new sound and symbol that they aren't used to seeing, and it can really quickly grab people's attention. But even beyond that, because it's a named ping that you'll be able to really easily use, hopefully if you bind it in a good place, you can now easily time people's vision on their regular wards and call out other things like blue trinkets and control wards. When I'm talking about timing wards, I literally mean you can time enemy wards by using the timestamps that you have in your chat. And if you don't have that turned on in your settings, then you absolutely should. Because if you ping on the minimap or on your screen, it gets marked in chat. And then from there, you can really easily use the fact that sight wards last from 90 to 120 seconds, or a minute and a half and 2 minutes, and time enemy vision so that you can move around it. And if you happen to know the enemy support is placing wards, then those last 2.5 minutes no matter what level they are. This can be really crucial for moving around the map in a way that your opponents don't expect, and becomes even more important if you're a champion with mobility, because now you can more carefully choose the walls that you're hopping over. The fact of the matter is that you aren't going to have a control ward or a sweeper up for every single ward that the enemy places, and so you do need to actually rely on this more than you might think. This does change depending on what champion and role you're playing, and even what items you buy, hint Umbral Glaive, but still, it matters a lot. And even just knowing that people have control wards or blue wards sitting somewhere can be a big deal, because it can allow you to avoid placing wards in wrong places where the enemy has easy control over them, or even just get some free money and experience because the opponents placed them in a bad position that you now know about. In terms of timing the enemy vision, there is one more trick that you can use to help that out a ton, and it's using the Z key, which is very useful. When you hold down Z, you actually expand your chat a lot, and you could see way more of your chat history. And assuming that you're playing with your chat disabled and you could see everybody's pings a lot more clearly and easily, and use their timestamps very easily, you now have the ability to get a ton of information at a really quick glance. When you hold down Z, assuming people aren't just spam pinging each other with weird stuff, then you could probably see anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes of chat history where it's just all things being pinged. Wards from your area's warded pings, maybe people are spamming pings on people's summoner spells that they happen to use, and that can clog things up a little bit, but it's really massive. It can easily sustain that, and you'll be able to have all this information every time you hit the key. And if that's still not enough, you could actually scroll for as long as you hold Z as well. You should be using this a lot, almost as much as you should be using the tab key. And I can give you a great example right off the bat. The moment that you load into game, you should be holding down the tab key. Why? Well, there's a couple reasons. It's better than pressing the O key, which is the other thing that can open up the whole scoreboard menu. And this is because O is like trekking halfway to Africa to hit a button on your keyboard compared to where you normally have your hand. You can simply move your pinky over from Q to tab, or if for some reason you happen to be using the 3-finger method for QWE, you already have your pinky on it anyways. Whenever you open up the tab menu and hold it down for a little bit, you can easily see several important things. You can look at your enemy's items and see if they have things like stopwatches, or maybe on their last recall they got an item spike and are really strong, but it of course has more than just items. You could also really easily and quickly see people's levels, which can be a great way to gauge how you're doing in the lane overall and how much stronger you are compared to other people who might be a lower level than you. A great example of this is the enemy jungler happens to show up on a ward as they clear it, and now you know what level they are just by checking the tab menu, even if you don't pan your screen over to them or use the F key trick that I mentioned earlier. The advantages don't stop there, because now you can also hover over your opponent's summoner spells and even just check what they are in general. The advantages of hovering over their summoner spells is that it can immediately let you know what the cooldown is, because you might not have those memorized. It can let you know that Flash has a 5-minute cooldown, Ignite has a 3.5-minute cooldown, or whatever other summoner spell you need to be worrying about. And if your opponent happens to take an unorthodox summoner spell, like running an exhaust on a mid laner I would say is pretty rare, that is something that can literally get you killed if you aren't paying attention to it. So that's another reason that you should absolutely be hitting the tab key. There's other details that you can definitely get from the tab menu, but they're all kind of similar to that. Looking out for control wards in the enemy's inventory, and then when they suddenly leave lane and now they don't have it anymore, that's kind of similar to watching out that they have a stopwatch in their inventory and paying attention to when they use it. It's a little bit different because, you know, you're tracking down a ward that you kind of know where they placed, but it's the same idea. The one other different thing that I would say you should be paying attention to is the enemy CS when they show up in lane and how much they actually have over time as they stay in lane with you. At the beginning of the game, you can simply check how much they're getting compared to you are before the first recall, but after the first recall and when they return back to lane and when you return back to lane, you should be paying attention to how much CS you're getting versus how much they're getting since you came back, and that way you can have a better gauge of how much gold they're holding on to. If you're getting really good at this, you can actually punish people really hard, because once you get mechanically good enough to be able to kill people in solo kills or even just coordinate ganks with a jungler decently well, you can kill them before they have the gold that they need to buy important items. Great examples of this would be killing somebody before they can buy a Tear of the Goddess, or a Lost Chapter, or a BF sword, whatever item that their champion really wants to get on their first recall. This can single-handedly completely change how the early game goes for you, and if you can master it just by getting used to pressing the tab key and working on those other skills a little bit, then you're going to be doing absolutely fantastic. Alright, now we've come to the last thing that I'm going to talk about, and it's kind of covering 3 different things that all do the same thing, but the big difference is that I'm going to tell you why one of them is really bad, even though it's kind of one of the more common ones. I mean, Riot actually even made a setting that you could use in order to actually have it happen. It used to be something that people had to go into the game's files and modify in order for it to work. I'm of course talking about binding attack move to your left click, which is something that many people do when they play ranged champions, either maining AD carry or mid laners or whoever. There's ranged top laners, which you know of course are cheating, or ranged supports and even ranged junglers to a certain extent. Understanding how to use attack move and just how easy it is to actually do can make a big difference in fights that you're taking, especially 1v1s where kiting is a big deal. And let me just make this absolutely painfully obvious. It doesn't matter what kind of champion you're playing, ranged, melee, or whatever the heck in between might be, kiting is always important unless you are just continuously going in because you absolutely crush your opponent. Sometimes you get to the point where the only direction that matters to you is forwards into the enemy's face as you annihilate them instantly. But in every other case, you need to be kiting people out 9 times out of 10, and in order to do that, a lot of people rely on attack moving. If you happen to be one of them, then you need to listen up, because what you've been doing for a long time of binding attack move to left click is something that you actually shouldn't be doing. And here's why. When you bind attack move to left click, you can no longer do things that you used to use left click for whenever you're trying to interact with anything on your HUD or just in game on the map. Whenever you left click on the map when you have this, you're going to be automatically moving to the place that you're clicking on when you're panning your camera, and that's not something that you want to be doing when you're just clicking on your minimap to try and move your camera somewhere that's important right now where none of your allies are nearby and you can't use the F keys in order to mitigate that problem. The next thing that becomes an issue, and it's kind of a 2v1 tip here, is that anytime you go to left click on your warding totem to double check on what the ward is actually going to be able to see, you're not going to be able to place the ward properly, because when you go to click on the thing, you actually end up clicking on the ground behind your HUD, and therefore you start moving away from where you actually want to place the ward. And this means that you would have to change your method of key binding. Instead of having things smart cast, you would need to change it to one thing and one thing only, and that would be cast on release. Because if you ever happen to normal cast any of your abilities, which some people do sometimes, like for Rumble ulti or other hard to aim abilities like that, if that happens to be you, then you actually can't normal cast anymore because the left click to attack move takes priority over casting the spell. This is a big problem, and you don't want to fundamentally change how the game is played or how you play the game in certain scenarios. I have a friend who always uses their heal on normal cast to make sure that they're healing the right ally, and that's totally fine, but if they did that, they wouldn't be able to bind left click to be attack move. As you can see, the list of reasons to not do this can get pretty long, and honestly there's probably some other niche stuff that I'm missing here, which is why you need to be using A click for attack move. Anytime you press down the A key and left click, it'll do the exact same thing as if you had your attack move bound to left click. And if you want to go even one step further, you can also instead hold down shift and left click, which is a lot easier if the only thing you're trying to do is attack move in between normal right clicks. Depending on what champion you're playing, this is going to change, because if you're playing something like Ezreal, you probably don't want to have your pinky on shift because you need to be pressing Q pretty often. And if you aren't used to using your ring finger for Q, then that might be a big deal. And so instead you would just settle for hitting A with your pinky and swapping between Q and A, which is totally fine. And with those, A click and shift click have wrapped up this video, and hopefully you guys have learned something that you could take into your next games, whether it be key binding something that isn't bound by default and going to using it, or just using existing keybinds that you didn't even know were there. To find more guys like this one that get to go even more in depth than I can in this video, and I mean, this is like, what, 18 minutes now? It gets to go pretty in depth, so you can imagine how crazy things are over on our website. All the videos we have up there are done by challenger level players, and like I said, they get to go really specific, where we can cover specific champions, matchups, roles, but having all of that doesn't stop us from covering the important generic and more basic things too, which everybody needs in order to do well at League. And of course, as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.